we're going to carry on. We spoke about Isaac last week. We're going to carry on speaking about Isaac this week again, part 2. This was the most strangest thing that has ever happened to me. As I was ministering about Isaac last week, I kind of already got my message on Isaac for this week. I read a scripture verse, and it's like I got the sermon right there, and it was the most difficult thing to do, to discipline myself in order to stick to last week's notes, and then we're going to proceed to this. And I want to share this with you today. If you are here for the first time, just to give you an idea what we do as a church, I tend to have one sermon I preach throughout the entire year. Okay, it's fantastic. So the series we're doing this year is Bible stories for grown-ups, and the idea behind this is quite simple. So many people remember Bible stories, but from a childhood perspective. And as we grow up as adults, what happens is we face mature problems, but our theology is retained in children's stories for one simple reason, is we don't study the Word and invest into the Word as much as we should. So we lean off of basic stories that we can remember, and then what happens is now as adults we face serious issues in our lives and God feels far away. But the reason is our theology, the way we understand the Word, did not mature with our age. And so the last thing that we can remember about Adam and Eve is some sort of argument about whether it was an apple or what fruit it was. We call it the Velcro theology. The last stories we remember is when the teacher used Velcro to put a sticker on Sunday school board. Anyway, so we're going to talk about this, and I'm hoping that as we're going to touch on a few deeper topics, it will just open your heart. I forgot my verse. 25 verse 21. Let's jump. It's Genesis chapter 25 verse 21. And you know it's going to go down if I only have one scripture verse for you today. I am scared. I'm very nervous. And I did ask the volunteers to make sure the doors are locked. Verse 21. And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife because she was barren. And the Lord granted his prayer, and Rebekah, his wife, conceived. That is it. Only 53 slides this morning. Okay, so it's gonna get rough. Okay. Last week, just to give you an idea on where we spoke about last week we said this, speaking about the conversation about Isaac, I was a little bit concerned. You have Abraham, you have Isaac, you have Jacob, you have Joseph, and all these other names, they're such prominent figures in the Bible. But Isaac is a quiet name. He doesn't do anything other than just follow his father around. And they talk about the children of the promise. But he's kind of settled and quiet. And we had this conclusion that you don't need to be dramatic to be significant. A very, very important conversation for our time today. Yes, can you go into the next one? Thank you. And so Abraham, his father, he began the promise that God spoke over the nation of Israel. But Isaac had a significance in this idea that he was meant to preserve the promise. But so many times we run after dramatic things because I want to be influential for God. I need to be dramatic. I need to be out there. I need to do some funny things, and then I'm making a difference for God. But here's the challenge, and here's the fundamental thing. There are certain things that God has blessed us with in our home. We have families, we have friends, we have ministry, we have church, we have a calling, we have all those things, and sometimes we evaluate our success based on how dramatic we are, but we've got one instruction, and that's just to faithfully preserve those promises from one generation to the next. And so we see Isaac as a faithful link between one generation to the next generation in God's big plan. That's the idea we spoke about last week, and we had a long conversation about that, and I'm going to draw from that idea, and hopefully this will be a blessing to you today. Every generation inherits something. Every generation inherits something. This is going to be a very sensitive topic. Yes, I'm a little bit nervous to share this with you, but thankfully the church board hasn't fired me yet, and so I'm just going to share what's on my heart. Hopefully I still have a job next week. Sometimes we inherit wounds from one generation to, I don't want to say sometimes, I want to almost use the word many times. We inherit wounds from one generation to another generation. But that's not all we can inherit. There are occasions where we can inherit wisdom as well. One generation can share some information, and it can carry on to the next. Can I just explain how this works? If you don't know, I'm going to use names just because it makes it a little bit more funnier. Just not far down from here, we have colleagues, wonderful colleagues, and they're called Christ Gen Church. Hello, Jackie, Mandy. And so what happened is their drummer, fantastic drummer, not as good as our drummer, but a very good drummer. Okay, not as good. Any case, he sometimes do work for us when it comes to IT things and stuff like that. And so one day he was popping up into my office because we wanted to install a new device that was needed, and I needed his expertise. And as he was trying to work, he gets frustrated because my telephone rings, and I need to pick it up. And now while he's working, I'm leaning over him, picking up the phone, and he just lost it there for a second. I still need to speak to Pastor Jackie about his drummer with regards to what happened. But the point just being, he stands up and he looks at my phone, and now you guys know this. You know, you have that normal telephone, and it's got that noodle thing, that long noodle thing. You guys know it's like this long, it's the draad, okay, that goes from the phone, and it's very old technology. It's very old. It works with a wire, okay. But what happens is over time, this thing's, it rinkunkels. I'm not even sure that's a real word. It cooks up, whatever you want to say, okay. However you want to say it, it goes like that, okay. And he gets so frustrated, and he says, "Young man," he's not that old, by the way, "I am going to help you today." Okay? He unplugs the wire. He untangles the wire for me. And magically before my eyes, a 10 centimeter, what's it called? Tangled cord, thank you. Tangled cord miraculously turned into a 30 centimeter distance, which allowed me to be on my phone, carry on with work while he could function. And let me tell you now, ladies and gentlemen, wisdom was inherited from one generation to the next on that moment, okay? Check this at home. If you still have one of those, it actually gets longer if you unwind. I'm just mentioning that's free. We just do this because we are a generous church. We just wanted to share that with you. So the idea with this is that from one generation, you can inherit significant advice. Now, let me just recap and give you an idea where this is going. When we have Abraham and Sarah, I need you to understand Sarah's barrenness. I'm not going to linger here long because you've got a lot of slides to work through. The next one quickly for me. Yes. Then Abraham fell on his face and laughed and said to himself, "Shall a child be born to a man who is 100 years old? Shall Sarah, who is 90 years old, bear a child?" You guys know the story, okay? But it's not just to Abraham, but it's to Sarah as well. And the Lord said to Abraham, this is a verse a little bit further down. He says, "Why did Sarah laugh and say, 'Shall I indeed bear a child now that I am old?'" I want you to understand this. Abraham, Sarah, there was barrenness in the conversation during the time, okay? And then they have Ishmael, and now you've got Isaac, but now Isaac is growing older. He gets the blessing of a wife, and he wants to start a family. But there's a little bit of a problem with this, because you can go to the next one. Rebecca experiences barrenness as well. And now we read this very quickly, but I want you to understand, he was raised in a house or in an environment where this must have been a conversation, because it's recorded. The barrenness of his mother and how God positioned Isaac, his birth, and how he was placed. And now the same issue pops up in the next generation, which the first generation experienced. Check this out. Chapter 25, verse 21. "And Isaac prayed to the Lord for his wife, because she was barren, and the Lord granted his prayer. And Rebekah, his wife, conceived." Now, what does this mean? Let me quickly show you. When Abraham and Sarah struggled, they turned towards Hagar. If you don't know the story, I need you to go read this in the Bible. So Abraham and Sarah, this is where Ishmael comes from. Because Abraham and Sarah, they made their own plans, because in the generation, they experienced a problem, and they tried to solve the problem in a manner which was not part of God's plan. Now we come to a place where Isaac experienced the exact same situation, but he recalls what his parents did during a time. And now when he's faced with the same thing, the next generation, when Isaac and Rebekah struggled, they turned towards prayer. So I'm going to take this idea and I want to draw it through to a very sensitive South African perspective that I want to share with you. So you need to understand that barrenness ran through the generation, but so did growth. So there were issues, there were wounds that carried over, but there were wisdom that also carried over. So a healthy generation does not only inherit stories. I want you to listen carefully. A healthy generation, it inherits wisdom. Now, this is going to feel like a grade 11 English lesson. Okay, I'm going to take you back to school. I'm going to show you a couple of things. And I hope your heart is open enough to hear where I'm going to from this. Generations, carrying wounds, carrying wisdom. And what does that concept mean to us? So we're going to talk for a second about language and culture, and immediately I can feel you guys judging me, because here we're going to talk about culture again. You hear this around every second corner, but I ask you just to tolerate me for a second, because I'm going to talk about Gandalf, okay? So, no, it's not really Gandalf, it's just, it looks like a young Gandalf, okay? It looks like a young version of Gandalf. That gentleman that you see on there, his name is David Crystal, and he is a British linguist who studies the English language, okay? And I'm going to quote a conversation here. It's not really a conversation, it's actually a monologue. So he's speaking, giving a toespraak, giving a conversation on his own to more people than one, and then he's talking to a crowd, and he addresses some complexities. And we're going to read a little bit, but I hope you're going to tolerate me for a moment, because, well, I found this significant. Why did countries choose English as their official language after their independence? They ask him this question, and he gives us this answer. He's talking about, please stand under correction, but I think he's talking about Nigeria, okay? He says, we became independent. What does independence mean? It means getting a new flag, a new uniform for your army, and all sorts of things. But it meant that what are we going to do linguistically? It sounds like a nice pasta, doesn't it? Okay. I just want to read that word one more time. Linguistically, independently, what are we going to do on our own with regards to language? Okay, significant conversation. Okay, you can go to that. We have been brought up in a climate of colonial English, British English in this particular case, and around the corner in Liberia, American English. What are we going to do now? We want to get away from this colonial history. We want a new language for a new nation. Here's the shocker. There are 400 languages in Nigeria, and which one shall we choose? If we choose that one, they will not like it. If we choose the other one, they will also not like it. And indeed, there was a civil war not long after. And so, listen to this very interesting conclusion. Better stay with English then, was the argument. At least everybody hates it equally. I hope we don't have any British guests here. I'm quoting someone else, so I'm just mentioning them. And as this was a surprising thing, this is what I hadn't expected. Let's make it our English. Let's make it our English. And this was the development of it. What I found so profound about this is, firstly, there's consensus because everyone dislikes it evenly, but something happened, and it's not just unique to the Nigerian perspective. This is the phenomenon of English on an international scale. Every country that had to speak English kind of adopted it in their own way. I want you to really open your mind and think about this. I want you to listen to your Afrikaans father speak English to you. Okay. I want you to listen to the way they express certain words. And then I want you to listen to how an academic English person that speaks the Queen's English, like my mother, they have this S and the T sound that it's so sharp, it makes me nauseous. I don't know. It's so professional. It's so good. And then you have us in Cape Town that say, yes, our day yesterday was lekker. And for us, we think English, lekker is a word that must just be part of the English language. But I want you to understand something extremely significant. I know I'm joking about this, but this is significant. Because previously we had this mindset. There's a correct way of speaking English, okay? Like, I don't want to mention any names, but the person who gave birth to me is very particular about certain ways of pronunciations and how to express certain things. And then there's a correct way of saying things in a certain manner, okay? And then you have me. And then it's not just me. I'm looking at my children, and they use the weirdest language, okay? Now, if you're older, this might sound like a very, very bad word, but to them, it's not a bad word. So when they say, that is cap, okay? That is cap. He's not using a swear word. He's not saying he's wearing a hat. What betekent it? You're lying. Okay. And then you've got Skibbity Toilet and Ohio. You see what I'm talking about? No, not right. Okay. They've got, it doesn't make sense, okay? Something is fire, and then it's good, okay? And then AJ tells me we were jogging, and my legs is not legging. The dictionary is not dictionarying. That's apparently... But here's the challenge with our mentality. We look at that and we label that is incorrect. For our culture, yes. That is incorrect from my perspective, yes. Okay. I'm going to gossip about Vuyo as well, okay. Vuyo, I try my best. Isi, I'm not going to do the click. It's just going to, Isi, cause I do my best to speak Xhosa to her in the best way. And then when she responds, I understand that it's sometimes just singular words. Okay, tlala phansi. Okay, tula wena. I'll still play. And I'm like, but Vuyo is very rude. Okay? Because when we speak a language ourselves, it's like you use long sentences. Good morning. Would you please be so kind as to take your seat right over there, and I will be with you soon. No, Vuyo, hlala phansi. Okay, just hlala phansi. Okay. Now, when she speaks in another language, let's say English, for example, it comes across like this. Sit. Okay. You see what I'm talking about? You see exactly what I'm talking about. Now, here's the thing. If I interpret that from my perspective of the way of using long flowing English, I would conclude that she's being rude. But from her Xhosa background, that's the way you do instructions. Because when the Xhosa construct is put together, you can use one word and it will contain a full sentence and a full instruction in one sentence. Now what happens is one culture is influencing another language the same way my Afrikaans is influencing another language. But what we do wrong is I take my approach to the language, and I'm not saying language shouldn't have rules. I'm just saying what we do is this is familiar to me, so whenever you use a word in that manner, it must be either rude or you are, I don't want to use that word, but you use it incorrectly. But in reality what it is, you are using it differently in the way that I'm doing this. And when you go into West Africa, for example, you will pick up that the languages are mixed. We do this even in Afrikaans. Because there are some words which I don't know how to spell in Afrikaans, and so I use the English version. Okay? So it's just how it works. I want you to pick up on this. How many people you speak to in the office, and then we've got in my side of the family, not my side, but in family on, I don't know how to say it. People I know who are family. Okay. Sometimes they will come and they say, "What is this mingles that you are speaking?" Okay. It's like you're speaking English and you're throwing a little bit in Afrikaans, and then you can't blend these things because that's not the proper way to speak the language. But I want you to understand, and this is going to blow your mind. You know this, but it's going to give you perspective. I want to show, let me just carry on with my notes because I'm getting way ahead of myself. Please don't forget this idea. I'm going to come back to this. Why is English a global language? He asks the linguistic. He asked him the question, he said, why is it global? He says the following. He said, I said English, he's on the next slide. is becoming a global language, you know. He's having this fake conversation. He says, oh yes, can you tell me why? Why do you think English is a global language? You guys are going to get very angry after I'm done with the slide. And he stopped and he said, well, it's obvious, isn't it? I mean, because it's the most beautiful language in the world. What other reason could there be? I know your face is straight, but you are angry because everyone is going to say there's no way that this foreign language is the most beautiful language in the world. There's no way that can be. Because all of us feel the same way. I'm going to show this to you in a second. Okay, he carries on. By the way, he's not saying it is the most beautiful. He's having a conversation. He says, because everybody thinks that their language is the most beautiful one in the world. I can remember I was a small chokkertjie, and my teacher was supposed to educate me, heard this word for the first time. I was shocked she didn't know it. Okay. Asemrowend. Asemrowend. And she spent the whole morning explaining why it's breathtaking. That's the word. Okay, breathtaking. Asemrowend. And when you say asemrowend in Afrikaans, for the Afrikaans people, it's beautiful. It takes your breath away. And when you say that in English, you've got your own beautiful word. My mom uses a long word. It's just, I don't know, I can't pronounce it. Okay. You've got these beautiful, but now what happens is, because it's my language, it becomes the most beautiful in the world. And now the thing is, because it's English, it's complex, it's beautiful. It probably came to the global scene because it's so beautiful and everybody loves it. Carries on. And he says, so this is the mythology that's out there, and so it was very important as soon as possible to try and track down the real reason on why English is a global language. Next one for me, please. And the real reason in the end, when you collapse everything down into one simple statement, is a language becomes an international language or a global language because of the power of the people who speak it, and there is no other reason. It's called colonialism, and even South Africa has been affected by that, okay? So now what happens is, some people look at English, some people look at Afrikaans. I mean, I can't remember. What do we have? I think we've got 12 official languages now, if I'm not mistaken. It's getting quite a lot. But the idea is everyone makes their own. But here's the thing. Check this picture out. If this picture confuses you, yes. Okay, watch this. I want you to see this quickly. This is a beautiful tree that addresses the languages in the world. Now, you don't have to zoom in to see everything, because I mean, the screen is not big enough to show the image to you. But I want you to see that there's a branch leaning all the way to the right, and on the right-hand side, it says English. It looks like there's these two eyes on top of the English word. But just below it, you will see how it branches out. And you have Afrikaans in the corner. You have Dutch in the right-hand corner. On the left-hand side, you have German. And in front of you, you've got English. But it all comes from a same root, from a Germanic tribe. Or there were actually 3 Germanic tribes that affected the English language. And it kind of produced from this background, and it was adopted into different areas. And so, listen carefully to what I'm saying to you now. Language adapted over time. Language adapted over time. Check this out. What we call normal today would sound foreign a few hundred years ago. Can I rewind 15 years ago? Can I rewind, let's make it a little bit longer, 20 years ago? If you had to walk into a church and preach in a jeans, you would not be allowed in many, many churches. Women had to wear hats in the churches. And so there's a lot of things that kind of adapts and moves on forward. So much so that if you had to take this church and tell people that the stage is painted black, there would not be a person in this building, because there was the sense of you can't have black in a church, for example. Okay, and so some people chose peach. I will show you the pictures, ladies and gentlemen. Mama laat sak aan. Okay, I can't even remember. I think it was bright orange, was it? No, I was you. I want to blame you. Okay. I'm just teasing, guys. I'm just teasing. I mean, you would walk into the church and you would immediately, what's that thing you get where you get confused about your direction, and you get confused. I want you to get this. But culture, next one, and language change all the time. And so what we do is this. We naturally make what is ours special. And that is, go to the next one, that is language, and that is culture, and it even affects worship. But I want you to understand one thing, and this is going to be very important, that culture is not constant. Allow me to preach for a moment. Culture is not constant. I have no issue with people celebrating their culture and their heritage and their background. There's absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I am concerned that we take a specific culture and we make it as if God's blessing is just resting on a single culture. Because here's the problem. Cultures are now competing against the idea that God belongs to them, when these cultures were the ones that's been adopted into God's family out of His goodness. And so instead of wanting to become part of God's family, we want God to become part of our family. And this becomes dangerous. Okay, I want you just to bear with me for a second over here. Okay, but this is the challenge that I want to get to, because if whatever background you come from, we intend to give our kids something. You know, this is the wisdom that was taught in our culture. We need you to inherit this. This is the stories. We need you to inherit this. This is the language. We need you to inherit this. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that, but here's the thing. Listen very carefully to what I'm saying. In 100 years from now on, what you were referring to as culture will not look the same anymore. The food is going to be different. Even the language is going to be different. The styles is going to be different. The vocabulary is going to be different. And if you think I'm lying, just go back in the history of languages and tell me a single language that has been consistently used since the beginning without changing all the way through up until modern time. It's almost, I'm not saying there can't be any, I'm saying it's almost impossible because of the influence of new generations taking place. So here's the question. If culture changes, what remains? I'm going to show this to you. I'm going to ask you just to tolerate me for a moment. I come from an Afrikaans background. I can't spell the language though, please. That's why when people type to me in Afrikaans, I reply to them in English because of autocorrect. Okay, I'm unfortunately one of those guys. But I'm going to quote a poem by Lina Spies. Okay, she was as far as I know, I think she was a professor in the Stellenbosch area. I think she's still alive. I stand under correction with that information. And she wrote a beautiful Afrikaans poem. And it's called A Pater Noster vir Suid-Afrika. A Pater Noster vir Suid-Afrika. Okay. I thought Pater Noster was a place you go for holiday on. Okay, that's what I thought. But I recently found out it's actually a terminology that refers to the Our Father prayer, actually. That's something that I didn't know. And so when you analyze this poem, you see this from a perspective of a prayer. Just a couple of verses. So if you don't know Afrikaans language, don't worry. I'm going to try and explain it to you. Okay. And it opens up like this. Here, laat die name geheilig word van al die kinders van die land. Van hulle wat modderkoekies gebak het uit sy aarde, dassies skrik gemaak het in sy klowe en wol getrap het in sy krale. Just pause there quickly. The most difficult part, beautiful poem, the most difficult part of translating is figuring out what dassies is in English. Okay, it's like a big hamster. That's the best way I can explain it to you. A dassie, we call it a das. I was just, there's a dassie op die berge. But now I don't know, okay? So I asked AI to help me, okay? Next one for me, please. I'm going to try and translate this for you. Lord, let all the names be hallowed of all the children of the land, of those who baked mud cakes from its soil. Obviously, a very direct translation. And startled rock dassies. Okay. Uh, Hyraxis. Yes. In its dassies, just call it dassies. We can add it to the English dictionary, okay? Dassies in its ravines and trod wool in its kraals. I don't know what kraal is in English, but it's kraals, okay? We're just going to leave it there. But I want you to pick up on the terminology. She's asking a very significant question in her Afrikaans language. God, would you bless all the children of the land in South Africa? All the children. I want you to pick up on the terminology. She carries on in this poem and talks about, and she uses color to illustrate this, how some of the farm workers would kneel down and shear the sheep, and how she would be anxious because she's scared the sheep is going to get hurt. And then she says, as a young girl, she's standing there, and she was assigned to give them their wages. And immediately she highlights this difference of authority and class and all this type of things. But then she comes to a significant conclusion where she ends off and she says, Gee ons liefdevolle hande, Heer. In other words, give us beautiful hands, hands that love. She's asking that. En sny u self versigtig on die belemmerde kleed. I'm not even going to try. She's asking God to intervene. She's asking God to judge. She's asking God to draw the line where the line should be. Dat daar nie onnodige bloed verspil nie. So we don't have unnecessary and reckless murders and blood that's spilled in our nation. En deel u self die loetjies uit. And she asks God. Previously, she goes back to her past and says, there was a time where I had to share these wages. But now her prayer in Afrikaans is, God, I don't want that job. I want you to share that out, to make the judge, to make the call. Afrikaans, listen to this. Everyone that speaks Afrikaans is going to say, that is beautiful. Because it's an Afrikaans language and that's our culture. Then I want to show you the national anthem quickly. Now, I know you guys know this. Go to the next one. Then we sing Nkosi Sikelele I Afrika. Now, nothing wrong with our national anthem. We read that, I'm talking about my perspective. I am Afrikaans in English. I read that, and then we don't really understand. We don't feel it. We don't understand it. When a lot of Afrikaans people, for example, sing this, it thinks of rugby and biltong, for example. Okay, just taking an example. It's just what happens because we don't understand it. But to someone who speaks the language of what is being stated there, I want you to pick up on the term. It says the following. It says, God bless Africa, in a language which some of us might not understand. There's another passage that says, go to the next one, please, for me. Nkosi Sikelela Tina Lusapo Lwayo. Do you know what that stands for? It says for God bless us, we her children. I want you to pick up the most significant thing that I want you to realize today. It's two languages, but it's the same prayer. I want you to grab onto that idea significantly in this moment. I want you to recall about Isaac from one generation to the next generation, this generation wisdom, this generational pain. And now we find these two different elements. And you can take almost any type of language and you will find this idea that it's the same prayer between cultures. It's the same prayer. It's in a different language. That's the only difference. But here the problem is that now we love that gedig. We love that poem because it's so close to our culture. But the thing is, in 200 years from now, things would adapt and change. It will adjust, and maybe you can even give it a little bit more time. Even to if you speak isiXhosa, even the language as well. English has infiltrated that, sometimes even Afrikaans as well. So you've got this adaptation in culture, this adaptation in language taking place. But now we find ourselves as individual cultural groups trying to fight and make God part of our family. But the reality is that God's desire is that these cultural groups will become part of His family. And so it pops up in our language, in our prayers. But for some reason, we can't make the connection between one another. See, that becomes a problem because Isaac shows us that he picked up a valuable lesson from his parents. They went through a problem and they tried to find a solution to the problem, but it caused issues. And when when the same thing happened to him, he drew from the wisdom from a previous generation and he tried to learn from them and move forward. So here's the thing. If culture change, if language change, if things adapt and change the whole time, what remains? And I want to give you a simple thing about constants in the kingdom. Now, you can put anything up there when it comes to the relational values, but I just want to give you a quick few because I want to conclude. Love, mercy, humility, service. All those things have the ability to transcend above a culture. Because God's kingdom values in the New Testament is still the exact same to today, even though we don't speak Greek anymore. Even though we don't read our Old Testament in Hebrew. We don't have these languages anymore, but we've got the same God still. We have the same values still. We have the same accountability still. Even though we find ourselves in a position with multiple cultures. Can I ask something very harsh to you this morning? How can we expect God to bless our nation if we won't even bless each other ourselves? It's not enough to read the prayers in our language. It's not enough to sing. You can go to the next one. Thank you. The prayers in our language. I think it's time that we become the answer to the prayers. Because we are praying the same thing, but we keep it separate because I don't understand the language, because it's not my culture. But we're all calling out to the same thing over and over and over again. But sometimes we are so stuck. We make a culture, we make our current culture so special that God cannot use us. And if you think I'm talking silly things, why do you think was it so difficult for the Israelites when Jesus came onto the scene? Because they were more loyal to their culture than when they were to what God was doing. So much so that God had to call someone like Paul and put him aside and say, I need you to be assigned to the Gentiles because I want all nations to become part of the single family. So I want to conclude with this one question. What will the next generation inherit from us? In my culture, it's going to be something like a little bit of chutney, a little bit of biltong, and it's pickled tuna. I've got so many cultures in my, I don't know anymore. Tramash. I've got a little bit of Portuguese, a little bit of African. I've got everything, man. It's just everything. But there's one thing I'm hoping that can move on. And that is the preservation of this promise of God where He says that you have the opportunity as a community to draw near to me. If there's one thing that we need to go beyond the language, beyond what's familiar, it's this idea of serving God that's going to transpose. The language can change, but the values will stay the same then. You will have your children move overseas. They're going to suddenly speak English with a funny accent that's going to sound very funny. They're going to talk about funny stores, but you know what will be constant even over the seas? It's when they take these values of God's kingdom into another area, it doesn't matter because the values remain. The value stays the same. And there's nothing that can affect that because love will remain love. Mercy, grace, forgiveness, honor, prayer. It remains the same. Whether you're doing it in English, Afrikaans, isiXhosa, isiZulu, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Just as long as this idea is there of preserving this promise to a next generation. Whether they're wearing skinny jeans or drip jeans or what, if it's what, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. What matters is if we throw away a generation just because they don't belong to our culture, just because they don't belong to what's familiar to us, just because they don't belong to certain etiquette that is important to us. Now, I'm not talking about lawlessness. I'm talking about inspiring us as a community to step beyond things which we have thought was important. Now, there's a certain sense where it's important to remember. It's important to respect. It's important to recognize your roots, but never at the cost of God's kingdom. And I know this is going to be, this has been a tough conversation, but I'm hoping you're hearing what I'm saying from the inside of here. Because I'm scared we all are fighting to get God on our side, and we're all going to miss Him collectively. Because God cannot work in division. We need to learn how to pray together. We need to learn how to build bridges together. We need to understand that we have access because God gave us grace. We don't have access because I'm a specific language, I'm a specific culture, I'm a specific country. Nonsense. Nonsense. That's exactly why Jesus died. To open access to the throne room beyond a specific nation, beyond a specific temple, beyond a specific structure, and say, now, in this tree, there will be many birds that flock together. There's these prophetic words over and over again. I want to conclude with this and share this. It's not my intention this morning to offend anyone. It's not my intention to insult anyone. It's not my intention to highlight anything specific. And if I used your name, I meant it in a very light-hearted way because I feel Memvuyo is judging me. I'm just kidding. I need us to understand that the future of our country is dependent on one thing. If you and I are willing and able to really humble ourselves before God and allow God to move how He wants to move. And sometimes it's not going to be comfortable to your language. Sometimes it's not going to be comfortable to our culture. Sometimes it's not going to be comfortable to our ideas. But remember when we kneel down and we say, thank you, Lord, that you died on the cross for me. That's the purpose of the cross. So that borders are opened up and the gospel can be released. And here's the thing. God does not belong to us, but we get the opportunity now to belong to Him. And if we can get that right, the future will look completely different. Because what our kids will inherit is something that cannot be changed by time. It cannot be changed by influence. It's not going to adapt. The language will change, the flavors will change, the colors will change, the songs will change. But the heart of worship will remain. The heart of respect, the heart of dignity, the heart of mercy, the heart of love, it will remain. And if you've been really battling with this, I'm going to conclude. I'm going way over my time. I want to conclude with this. Do yourself a favor and go look at the progress of language. Go look at the progress of culture. It consistently changes. Be careful of committing everything into something that's changeable. It makes more sense to invest and keep your eyes. How does the word say it? We should set our mind on things that are above. Because nothing on earth can take that away. Let's pray. Father, thank you for your word that carries power and authority. Thank you for this opportunity as we gather as a community. Lord, my prayer is that your Spirit would minister to us. Thank you for your faithfulness, Lord. I understand for many of us, this can be quite a tough conversation. But Lord, my prayer is that our eyes would really open up. That we would understand that you have graciously given us access. Lord, my biggest fear as an individual is that I become arrogant with your grace. That I become selfish with your grace. That I become stingy with something that has been gifted to me. And may you give us the courage and the wisdom and the insight to really exemplify the character of your Son, so that we can live out the gospel, that we can look at previous generations, that we can learn from them, that we can draw from the stories, draw from the wisdom, and really treat one another with dignity and respect, and realize that we have access because of your goodness, not because of our goodness. pray that in Jesus' wonderful name. Amen.